Hi, I'm Shahar from the Copilot.cx Mavericks team, and I want to show you how to create your first in-app message. Basically, the idea is that there are different layouts. You can fit it specifically to your app, but I'm no designer, so I'm just going to show you what you can do from there. And let's take one example of a 2.4 Wi-Fi gigahertz issue where you connect to the wrong Wi-Fi and you get an error connecting to the device. So as you go in to create those in-app messages, you have various layouts like a regular, standard pop-up, or full screen. I'm going to go with the half screen that has an image on top. And start by adding in the content, right? I want to say something like, oh, having issues. Something short. You're in their app. They're like literally using the product as you speak, and it will pop up directly, so you can talk to the person directly as they're having that issue. Make sure to connect to the 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. And then the call to action, of course, you want to send them to subscribe, you want to send them to buy, you want to send them to get help, whatever. And that normally goes to something like, show me how. And maybe that's going to be like a red button that I have some issues and I want to get them to show me how. And again, you can go through actions here. We have various native actions that describe in a little bit of a deeper way in another article. But in essence, I would send them to a video or something like that to watch. And I can also add a different action just for a dismiss. So I have something like, oh, I'm good. Other than that, I can also, and I would always recommend to add an image, so you have a little bit more vibrancy and that idea, as well as playing around with the colors to fit your app. So it really depends what your app is colored like, but I would normally create these in-apps to fit the color scheme of your app. You can literally put in the colors from the app design itself. And from there, you're good. Basically, you have a pop-up that shows on time that will go to these people and explain to them what to do and get them to do that, and thus basically getting a 5 times, 10 times better CTR than emails. But there are two other things that I want to talk about as well. One is the triggers. So most of the pop-ups that you use for rating, sales, stuff like that will be when app is active. And that means it just pops up whenever the app is active, whenever the user is using, and just the fact that they are using makes it worth the while for us to show this pop-up. But in other times, specifically like this one, when I disconnect from the Wi-Fi because of this issue, I would look for a user-triggered event or an event with a parameter that basically says that this is happening. So I would go for failure, right? Let's say Think connection failed, when I failed to connect to my device. And what happens here is that the in-app will actually wait on the phone for that user as they open the app, but only when they reach that stage of Think connection failed will they get that issue. And this can be any type of event that you get. So any event that comes from the app itself can be usable to trigger a pop-up, and it will show on time instead of waiting, instead of anything like that as this is happening. You can also test this, right? You can send yourself a test, and in the test itself you have the ignore trigger, which will show it whenever, but you can also leave this blank, and then when you run it, you'll actually test the trigger itself. One last thing I want to talk about, and again, we have an article about this specifically as well, is the touchpoint policy. So basically, we have a touchpoint policy on in-apps, basically to protect yourself from yourself, and make sure that if you have 50 messages going to the same person, they do not get it all the time. But if it's a critical, technical pop-up that you want to show whatever, and you want this in-app message to go directly to that person at that time, no matter what, you click this ignore touchpoint policy, and that pop-up will show directly. From here, you can play around, you can always change the layouts, you can always come back and change and do some A/B testing and whatever. But this is the baseline of creating your first in-app message.